So why don't we start with that? If this is geometric, can you tell me what's my multiplier in that whole pattern? So first of all, we're going from positive, negative, positive, negative. So what does that tell me? My multiplier must be a negative number. And when you get smaller, what do you know about your multiplying number? Has to be less than 1, so probably a fraction. Can anybody think of the fraction that's doing that? Half. So negative a half. That is labeled the R, the ratio. That's what it's called, the ratio. Okay, so here we go. Find the 10th term. So term 10. So that's where I put that. Term 10 equals T1. So that stands for the first term, so 80, times R to the N subtract 1. What is the N again? What does that represent? We did yesterday. The number of term that you're going to be. Okay, I have something to tell you. This is my pet peeve, and I've told you repeatedly, and some of you still did it on your test with your quadratic formula. If you are going to be doing something like -6 squared, okay, that is written incorrectly. You have to be putting brackets on that, and some of you on your test didn't do that. That's why I told you in the b squared, just write 36. Because some of you typed that in and then it made it all messy and then you got errors and, okay? So, okay, does that make sense? You have to put it in brackets when you're doing an exponent like that. Okay, so there's your practice. Type it into brackets. So you're going to go -1 divided by 2 to the 9th. That's how you would be typing that into your calculator, that button. And please don't do 10 minus 1 in your calculator. I want you to do that in your head before you start that, right? You know what I mean? Just put in 9. So this one is a specific typing. The N, the number of term position. Like if you were to do like a bunch of blanks, I want to be in the 10th blank spot. You know what I mean? I'm trying to figure out the 10th term. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Like I'm trying to figure out what would the 10th in the pattern be. Like this would be called term 1, term 2, term 3, term 4, like the N on this would be 4. You see it? Yeah. Okay, here's something exciting about your calculators. So when I typed, because I did 1 divided by 2 as a division sign, it gave me a decimal answer. I have this special button, lots of you have it on your calculator here, A, B, fraction C, and look at what it does. It turns my answer into a fraction for me. And if I hit it again, it can turn it back into a decimal for me. That's a very handy button. I think most of you have that button. And if you can't find it but are interested in finding it, then sometime after this, call me over and we can look through your calculator for that button. Okay, number 2. So tell me, first of all, let's say, well, what is the ratio of this pattern? What is the multiplier? So it looks like 2. So what am I doing? I'm going to find term 11. So the formula says term 1, so 5 times the r to the n minus 1. So I'm going to show you what I would type into my calculator is this, 5 times 2 to the 10. I don't need brackets on the 2 because it's not a division fraction or it's not a negative. But I am going to put this as a 10. I'm going to do that in my brain before I do it in my calculator. You should always ask yourself if your answer makes sense. So if I kept going, the next term would be 80, 160, 320, right? Da, da, da. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's getting bigger. It'll get bigger, bigger, bigger. Okay, number 3. Would you agree maybe that you don't see your R? I don't see it. So what do you do to get your R? What do you do to get your multiplier if you don't see it? You take any term and divide. So you pick, doesn't matter, they're all the same between each other, right? I'm going to go negative 15 over 8. What's the secret to dividing fractions?
Why can't you just do straight across?
Because you're dividing.
Yeah.
So I'll give you I don't know.
Oh, I see. Now I see.
Like this, if you divide it by that, I don't know. I don't know. I have to think about how to explain why you can't do that. Okay, so I'm going to times and I'm going to flip. Okay, are you okay if I scratch off both negatives right now? Is that okay with you? 2 negatives make something positive. I'm also going to reduce. What do you want to divide? Let's go the 15 and the 5. What could I cross them both out by? I can divide by 5, so that's a 1, and that's a 3. And what else could you do? 8 and 2. So if I divide them by 2, this would turn into a 1 and a 4. So 3 times 1 is 3/4. That is my R. Timesing by 3/4. Okay, here we go. Term 6. Formula. Term 6 equals term 1 times 3/4 to the 6 minus 1 so you don't write this, but this is what I'm showing you what kinds of buttons I'm doing on my calculator. I'm doing this in brackets times this in brackets to a 5th exponent. That's what I would do. So I would accept both of these answers. This is the decimal. It is a fraction. Okay, and again, I just use that secret button on my calculator. The fraction button. I can change. What? so that's how to figure out a term. Okay, so we're going to jump one section and we're going to do this one. So this is geometric still, but I'm going to do the sum of it. Okay, so what does a sum mean? It means, so if I take a sequence that looks like this, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. If that's a sequence, what is the sum doing? It's technically adding. It's doing that. This is what the formula is doing. It's adding all the terms that are there. Okay? So the last formula we did was a formula to figure out just a certain term. And now the formula we're going to do is going to figure out the sum. If I put all of the string of numbers together, what would they add up to be? Okay? All right, so here we go. First things first, can you give me the pattern ratio? What am I doing? 3 to -6. -6 to +12 is doing a multiplier of -2. Okay, so here we go. Sn. What is the sum of n, which is 10 terms? N is the number of terms that you want. T1 is 3, the first term. R is the ratio, so I'm going to do a -2 in brackets for sure. To the n, so what's n again? The number of terms, so I'm going to do it to a 10, -1, and then I'm going to do a -2, subtract 1. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, brackets are your best friend. There's a lot of brackets, so be careful how you type this in. This is where I get most errors, is just figuring out how to type this. So tell me how we did. How did we match? Just typing it in. How did it go? -1023. Okay, don't forget to divide by, and then this would need brackets, right? Okay, are we good to go to number 2, or are people still trying to figure out that calculator stuff? Okay, number 2, I'm going to figure out what the R multiplier is, the ratio. So maybe I don't see it, so I could take a term divided by a previous one. I could take a term and divide it by a previous, and I would probably pick the 3 term divided by the one in front of it. Well, that's just 3/4 then. So 3/4 is my R value. Okay, so here we go. Find the sum for the first 8 terms. So the sum of 8 terms equals term 1, 4, bracket the R to the n minus 1. And I would put that in brackets as well. I mean, it doesn't show you in the formula, but you should understand when you type that in. Okay, let's see how your typing goes. This one's tricky. Again, brackets are your best friend. How are we doing with the 14.4? We're getting it with the fractions, the brackets. Okay, last part of the geometric, and then tomorrow we'll deal with arithmetic. Okay, so this is the same concept where you're adding the terms, adding the terms, adding the terms. But this is particular in that what's happening if the ratio is less than 1? What's going on with your sequence? If your ratio is less than 1, you're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Would you be okay if I kind of told you eventually it's just going to be so small, it's like you're going to add hardly anything onto it, and it kind of caps off, basically, right? Is it going to make a change if I add 0.000001 to something eventually? No. Okay? So it's getting smaller, 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 smaller. Eventually it's going to be to a point where we're almost adding just nothing on. Is it going to be exactly 0? No. It'll never be exactly 0, but it's going to get close to. Okay, so here's number 1. Tell me what the R is again. What is the multiplier of this one? And it's going to be a small number because it's getting 842. That's getting smaller, so it's a fraction of a half. Okay, so here's the formula. Find the sum of the entire thing. That's why I have an infinite symbol. Find the sum if this goes on forever, ever, ever. Term 1, 8, divided by 1 subtract a half. And that's the formula. So can you get me an answer on that? So you should use brackets, right? In your calculator, you should be using brackets with that part. Did you get 16? Okay, so I'm going to show you in the long way. I don't want you to write this down, but this is what's going on. So if I added 8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1 plus, can anybody tell me what the next number is here? 0.5 plus a quarter plus an eighth. Okay, I'm going to add, and it keeps going. It gets smaller and smaller. 8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1 plus a half plus 0.25 plus this. If I just add this, I'm at 15.875. Would it make sense that eventually it probably reach close to 16? Yeah. I'm going to add something that's smaller and something smaller. Okay. What's your R? Here's probably the best place to look. What would I have to multiply to go from 1 to 3/4? I'd have to multiply by 3/4. So if I plug into the formula, term 1 divided by 1 subtract the ratio, and again I'm going to use lots of brackets. I'm going to be putting that in brackets for sure. Okay, and I would accept any of these answers. There's the decimal, mixed fraction, improper fraction, whatever you wrote, whatever, I'd do all three of those are good.